Welcome everyone from all over the world to Come Together. This is our free weekly webinar series. If you're new to the show, our purpose here is to show you our very own strategies and techniques for effective communication, virtual and otherwise. So each week we spend 30 minutes with some of Duarte's communication experts. We talk through topics, answer your questions, and we've been having some fun too. And along the way, we take you behind the scenes here at Duarte to see how we solve some of the world's toughest communication challenges. I'm Doug Neff, Duarte's content director, and I'm your host. Last week, Jeff Davenport and I talked about how to deliver dynamic virtual presentations, and we ate popcorn. That episode and the rest of our series can be found on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. And you'll also find a blog post for each topic of the web series on our website, and the video for that series will be embedded in the blog post. This week, we're going to be talking about slides. And I'm so glad to have one of Duarte's brilliant graphic designers with us today. Charity Canny is an art director at Duarte. She likes cooking herself a steak on Mother's Day, and she gets really excited about slides that you might think are boring. Seriously, I love watching Charity get worked up about data slides. She loves them. Thanks for joining us today, Charity.
Thank you for having me.
So let's frame things up. I know you brought a lot of stuff with you today, so I'm going to keep us moving fast so we get through it all. But what did you bring us today to talk about?
Well, as we all know, in the last couple months, we've all had to shift our thinking and try to deliver our presentations virtually. Because of the limitations of the technology, that's been somewhat of a tall order for everyone, both the presenter and the audience. So in this webinar, I brought some samples and some tips on things that might help the design of those slides.
Got it. And just before we jump in, I'd like to invite all of our friends at home, wherever you are in the world, to add your questions as a comment, and we'll answer them as we go or at the end. Our producer, Emily, will feed them to us, and we'll answer them within the content of the webinar, or we'll save some time at the end to answer them. All right, take it away, Charity.
Great. All right, let's start first with design thinking. This is the process of considering the user and designing solutions for them. In presentation design, we often consider the user the person who is using the presentation file, whether that be an event file or a template. But usually when we think of users in presentation design, we're actually thinking about the audience.
Okay.
We create a lot of visuals for the audience that they can easily access at a glance. And we want to make sure that those visuals aren't disrupting the presenter.
Yeah, what I hear you talking about, Charity, is empathy. And we've talked throughout our web series here a lot about empathy. And some folks might be surprised to hear it used when we talk about slides. So could you say more about that?
Yep. I have 3 tips, and I want to start first with the audience. With the audience, you want to think a lot about their individual environments, where they are in your virtual presentation. This is going to inform a lot of your design decisions. And you want to think about how they're viewing it.
So you mean what they're going to be watching it on, like whether it's a little tiny phone or it's a big tablet or a bigger giant screen?
Exactly. If they're on a PC, a laptop, tablet, or phone, those screen sizes and resolutions are going to affect the readability of the slides. But the challenge, as we all are finding out, is that we can't actually know for sure what that output's going to be.
Yeah, we face that question with this web series every week, that we send it out on Facebook Live, and this week we're also on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we don't know what size screen people will be watching, and probably all of those. So what screen size do we plan for?
Well, I have a stat for that.
There you go.
Yep, there we go. Some analysts say that the number of Facebook users who only use a mobile device to access the app is 78%. That's 3 out of 4 people that are watching us right now. That might not be true all the time, but it's somewhat known that it's a large number, so I can design for that. When you're thinking about your design, approach it in terms of what the most likely way an audience will physically access that screen. For example, if you're designing for a day-to-day work situation, it's a good bet that people will be on a work computer. And then from there, you can move into your actual design decisions. And
I see. So Sorry, let me interrupt there, but you're saying you don't have to design for the lowest common denominator necessarily, but the broadest swath of who's going to be mostly watching this.
You're going to drive yourself crazy if you are trying to design for the lowest common denominator. Just try to find out the knowns and design for those.
Got it. Okay. And you were about to talk about questions people ask.
Yes. Well, one of the most common design decisions that people are asking about is fonts. They want to know what font size they should be using. So I'm not talking about those big in-person event conference presentations, which you've seen have really simple graphics usually and really large text. I'm talking here about your workday, your town halls, your pitches and conference rooms, everything you did before that you're now doing on a virtual call.
Yeah, and everyone wants an answer that is going to work all the time in every situation. You know, if I can just lock in size 24, you know, Helvetica Neue, then that'll work all the time. And it doesn't really work all the time, right?
Right, exactly. And just to make that point, I brought an example of a couple different screen situations.
Oh, great.
So this first one is a really typical layout. You have your basic title on the top and 2 columns. You have headers that create your visual entry points. It's a little bit dense, yes, but overall it has a fairly clean layout. It's a typical work presentation. Because of the text size, though, that you see here, this is a 12-point font on this 16:9 slide. It would be really hard to read actually in a live conference room. But in virtual presentations, this slide could actually be presented to your virtual audience if you, as the designer, have decided that most people are probably going to be on their work computers. So it's like PC and monitor could read this okay. And that's because your reader is much closer to the screen.
Yeah, we're right up in it, so you can handle that 12-point type. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that said, if you're pretty sure a lot of your audience is going to be on devices, you would need to re-swizzle your content so you can boost up the font size. So on this example, you can see I've increased that header and the body copy size quite a bit, but in order to do that, I had to summarize those bullet points. I also added a lot more space between things because as the device size goes down, the text starts to blend together. You need to add more space.
Got it. Okay.
And then I have one more that's super simplified. It's the 3rd level design that's even kinder to your small devices.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, super simple layout, a lot less detail, larger text, bullet points completely removed. This can seem pretty extreme, but it's a safe bet for mobile presentations.
That is super clear, Charity. Excuse me. And I saw a question come in about that Facebook stat, which leads me to a question. Someone asked, does the Facebook stat apply when you're watching a session like this? So are 78% of the people watching it on a device? And my question for you was, which did you design for when you designed this deck for today?
Well, as a person out in the world and knowing Facebook, I also agree that there's a large number of people on mobile. So even before I saw that stat, I started designing this deck for the likelihood of people watching it on mobile. And then the stat kind of reiterated that design decision. I saw lots of stats as I was going through the research, and all of them were huge numbers like that.
Yeah. And except for examples where we're showing the differences, most of the slides in this deck are going to be real simple like this. People will see. Okay, great.
Yeah. So to sum that up, font size can go down as long as your audience is on some sort of computer. This isn't a requirement, though. It's just kind of a neat byproduct of virtual presentations.
Got it.
And then if you're on mobile device or designing for mobile devices, font size should definitely go up. And this is a requirement if you're designing for mobile.
Okay, I get it. So if as the screen size goes down, the font size has to go up. Yep. Is it really just that simple?
It is that simple.
Okay.
But basically, all this comes back to the real concern that people have when they're asking about font size is because they're trying to protect the readability for their audience, which brings me into the next topic about readability for the audience, and that has to do with color.
So readability isn't all about font size, color matters too. Got it. Okay.
And specifically, the question that we get a lot is what color should the backgrounds be? And that was even before this virtual world. And the answer to that is really to design for contrast. And contrast is when you look at things on the slide and everything is clearly differentiated. And this is a little different than emphasis. Emphasis is more of an offshoot of of contrast. Emphasis is when something within all of that stands out.
Got it. Okay.
So let's run through a contrast exercise. I'm assuming because of those stats that a lot of people might be watching this on mobile. Sometimes when we're working with a client and we suspect readability issues, we set up an exercise similar to this so that they and us can see the contrast. Here we see 3 of the Duarte brand colors, and they're all readable to me as I created this on my own computer. And most likely, if you had created this slide, they'd be pretty readable to you. But what we need to think about is the audience screen. Will that blue be showing in the saturation that it showed on my screen? Will it be washed out? Already, as I'm looking here on different devices, I can see it's a little bit washed out, and even the contrast on that green is a little bit low.
For sure. This is like going to the eye doctor, right? Is it better like this or better like, okay.
Exactly. And then we do a second test where we reverse out that same color on a white background. So clearly the black text is best, which is no surprise. The green text is really in the middle. It's better than I thought it would be on a white background, but that blue, don't design with a blue like that over a white background, especially if you think that a lot of people are going to be on devices.
Yeah, I have just I have a little camera or my smartphone open as a reference monitor to see how we look, and looking at my computer screen, and that it's very different on the mobile phone. So it sounds like you're saying test it out, and you'll see for yourself. Yeah, exactly.
All this is not to say don't use color. If you were watching a presentation which was slide after slide of white, that's going to end up being pretty boring for people. In fact, we often coach people when we're designing for them to shift colors at key transition points, because it helps bring the audience attention back to the slide if it had started to wander.
Got it. Now we have a question in that will apply somewhat now and somewhat later, I think, but let me put it out there. Do you recommend using images as backgrounds?
We're going to actually touch on that a little bit, but you can use images on backgrounds in virtual presentations, except for blank, which I will get to.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Coming back to the topic of audience attention and how shifting that background can bring the audience back to you. My next tip 2 of 3 is about guiding their focus.
And I love how you just shifted to a dark background, and now magically all the audience has been drawn back into our presentation.
So we're always designing for this, whether it's virtual or not, but in the virtual world, the challenge of the audience attention wandering is intense.
For sure.
If you think for a moment about the last big presentation you saw, maybe at an event or conference, nowadays, those screens are so big. For me, I feel like they're literally seizing my eyeballs and saying, pay attention. And the speakers, they're really dynamic and storytellers standing up front. They have a stage presence. But if you scale down now to like more of your day-to-day in-person stuff, maybe your town hall or a pitch that you saw that was really persuasive, in both of those scenarios, you have to think, was it because of the visuals or was it because of the presenter? In all presentations, it's really actually a combination of both. It's a good balance. The presence of the speaker and how they're speaking carries a really large portion of a presentation. But that person's now often on the side, literally the side of the screen in a tiny little box.
I know, just like us, we're trapped in here in these little boxes, right?
The stage presence or even the proximity of the presenter is missing. They may still be there, but there's that presence that we're missing. That was a really powerful tool in the presenter's toolbox. So as you're designing for focus, think of all the other things that might be happening in front of your audience at that moment. That wandering audience is a huge challenge. Multitasking is an urge that's really hard for even the best of us to resist.
Yep.
So a lot of that burden that the presenter had there has shifted now to the visuals. So
it makes your job harder.
It just makes it more fun, more interesting.
Okay, good.
More experimental. So of course I have 2 tips for this as well.
Great.
The first one is about variation. Make more slides and put less content on each slide. You're going to toss out your ideas about slide count. Every time something on the screen changes, attention can be drawn back to the presentation. In general, we're always trying to design one idea per slide anyway, but in the virtual space, my recommendation is to try to take it one step further. If two or more things on a slide don't explicitly need to be compared or shown together, split them across slides. And this is going to increase slide count, but I guarantee it, the time it takes to say that stuff is going to be the same whether you split it or not.
I love this, Charity, because it echoes what Jeff said last week about being a dynamic presenter. And a lot of his advice came back to changing it up, being different, and varying your pattern of speaking to people, that drew them back in. And you're saying this very same thing is true for your slides. You don't want your slides or your delivery to be boring.
Exactly. So I have a couple examples for this, of course.
Great.
This is another very typical kind of day-to-day, quickly put together slide. This slide might take a couple minutes to talk through. And unless you're actually having a discussion on this slide where you're engaging your audience in a back and forth conversation, you run a high risk of losing them in this virtual world.
Yeah, for sure. I think we just lost some people when they saw this slide. You see this in every product pitch, right? Okay, so how do we do better with this slide?
We're going to split each of these columns into its own slide. So you're going to try something like this.
Oh, okay.
Each point on the previous slide is on its own slide. The text font size, as I mentioned earlier, is bumped way up. And this is an extra useful habit to get into for this virtual presentation world. But of course, you may want to or need to keep all that stuff on the slide there. I'm not saying don't keep the stuff on the slide if it needs to be there. But in that case, I'm going to recommend to try adding a build, which is my second point.
Got it. Okay. Use builds wisely.
Use builds wisely.
I love this, Charity, in that how people will ask us questions and they'll want a hard and fast answer, like the font question. And this is another question we'll get asked a lot too, is that how many things can I have on the slide? And the truth is we serve a lot of different clients who come to us with, no, all that needs to be on the slide. And then your job as an art director is to consider that a design challenge and solve it.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
we'll keep everything on the slide, but we're going to find a way to still make it interesting and compelling. And that's where our jobs get the most interesting, I think, is that there aren't just rules that we live by, they're guidelines, and then we have to find our way through to the solution.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Builds are animations applied to the different elements on your slide that help them appear and disappear and move. It also, when I'm talking to clients in the way that you just spoke about, Doug, the way that we try to help them manage this is to frame it like it's a journey. We're helping the presenter create a journey for the audience through the information that they're presenting instead of just throwing it all at them all at once. And I have an example of that.
Of course you do. All right.
So let's look at that same slide that you saw that it was pretty dense. So here I have applied the animation. I applied builds to each topic under the main idea. And the purpose is builds help keep people from reading ahead. And it also creates attention because the audience can see that something else is going to happen, which helps keep their attention to the slide. And by the time you get to the end, you've created a visual journey with the audience to walk through the content with designed milestones placed on the slide using those builds.
So you're giving us permission to use any animations we want, right?
Oh, please no, because there's a dark side to animations, and it's even stronger in the virtual space. Okay. So reducing noise. That dark side of animation is visual noise. Many of the designers and presenters out there are already aware of the problem of visual noise. And just for anyone who's not, this is when stuff is happening on the slide and is getting in the way of clear messaging, clear visuals. And this includes things like dense content or bedazzling slides with random or inconsistent graphics. But a problem that's automatically worse in virtual presentations is too much animation or poorly set up animation. So to combat that, I recommend just keeping it simple. Keep this in your mind when you're working with animations. I'm not saying don't use them at all. I mean, I just walk through how they can be a powerful tool for bringing your audience on a journey and guiding their focus. But if you do use them, apply minimum complexity.
Got it. And that makes total sense. Keep it simple as you can. And I love, Charity, how you're showing us these nuanced ways that virtual presentations are different you know, a lot of people think that virtual presentations are just harder, or some people might think they're easier because you get to stay at home and have your pajama bottoms on. But they're not necessarily easier or harder, but they are a different design environment.
Yeah, it's just kind of a little nuance that needs to be applied to probably the good habits I know you are all having right now.
Yep. Okay, so what kinds of simple animations do you recommend?
Okay, in keeping it simple, you would most likely want to use a simple appear, a simple quick fade. Floats, paths, and in-place zooms usually show okay in virtual presentations. And they work even better the more simple the object is that you're applying them to.
Okay.
For caveat to all this, in this virtual world of presenting, we all know the big bad wolf in the background is the bandwidth.
Right.
So for example, I have normally pretty good bandwidth. We have 3 boosters around in this house, but I never really know if my bandwidth is going to be throwing a hissy fit today. And I certainly don't know what my audience's bandwidth is going to be. So problems with bandwidth on either end are going to make the smoothest animation appear rough and jagged. And this is visual noise. It steals the attention from what the presenter is saying. So basically the solution is don't make stuff zing all over the slide. Just make it appear and move on. Got it.
Got it. Okay.
So the second thing about animations are actually transitions, which is a form of animation that's applied to the whole slide. So in real life, in person, my go-to for regular presentations, the transition I always use is a really short fade because I feel like it softens the slide a little bit as you're going from slide to slide. But in this virtual world, I opt usually to do no transition because bandwidth can affect these too. But if you are going to use a transition for some reason, I mean, I've seen them work really well, and the ones I've seen worked really well are the cuts, fades, and push. Complex animations like morph or those like blinds or flip, anything with a lot of moving parts on the transition, it's really not going to work. And to get back to that question earlier about an image in the background,
right?
Any kind of background that's more than a solid color or a really subtle texture is going to make that transition chug. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but I'm pretty confident saying 90% of the time it's going to slow down the slide movement from one side to the other. So if you are using images, they should be really subtle.
Got it. And I don't know if everyone can tell, but we have our template here has this lovely dark wood background, which adds a little bit of visual interest against the light text. But that's an image that when you transition every single time, the software has to throw that whole image over the bandwidth and handle that transition. So we would maybe choose to make this a dark brown or a black background instead, just a flat color, and that would give us a better chance of using those transitions.
Exactly.
Got it. Got it.
So the second tip for reducing visual noise is about consistency. No matter how happy someone in your audience is when they're watching a presentation, it's going to take effort for them to decode that slide and listen to the presenter at the same time. That's always been the case. But in this virtual world, it's even more work for them to stay engaged. So you can ease some of that work by being really consistent when you're designing the slides.
Okay.
So I could talk all day about design and the principles of design.
I know. It's just like I told you guys, Charity loves talking about design.
I've had to revise this slide so many times to keep it simple here. So there are basically 4 levers of consistency when you're talking about slides, and that's text, shape, line, and graphics. And to be consistent, it's applying things like color, the same colors, the same size, very similar or expected positions, using the same color and styles for emphasis on text or images. What it does is, and the reason it's important is because it teaches your audience how to quickly read the visuals from slide to slide. They learn it from slide to slide, and they can pay more attention to the presenter. And when you want things to stand out, you don't have to bedazzle them with an extra image or animations. If you've been designing with consistency, that emphasis is going to stand out naturally.
Got it. And the good news, Charity, I know you would just want to spend all day talking about this, is that we have workshops that take people through all of these principles so they can spend more time with some of our facilitators and learn about these principles of consistency.
Yep. So there is a simple habit that I do that I wanted to share with you that helps check consistency, font size, color, contrast, and variance.
Okay.
So if you go to the next. This is a slide sorter view of our previous webinar with Jeff. You can see here that the text from slide to slide may be a little bit varied, but the slides are very consistent. The text has very similar treatment applied to it. It's the same font. May not be the same size because the content is different, but the audience had no trouble recognizing what's the title, what's the subtitle, what am I supposed to do with this information? So when you look at your design in slide sorter like this, you can get a sense of what's going to be clear. Even myself, looking at this deck that I'm presenting to you, my last step was to carve out an hour, look at it again in slide sorter, and go through and adjust font sizes for mobile, and also to make the colors really consistent.
I love that. That's a great tip, Charity. Charity, I am amazed at how much you packed into 25 minutes. Okay, let's do a quick recap.
Okay. So starting with the audience, you're going to think about the most likely scenario that your audience will be in and design for that. Design your text and colors to meet their needs. And then your guiding for focus is about spreading content across more slides and reducing content on each slide. So you're basically varying the slides that they see. And then if you have a lot of info on the slide, use builds to focus attention to specific information.
And then using a build on this slide. Yeah.
I am. This is one of the only ones in the back. Reducing noise. So in the world of uncertain bandwidth, keep animations and transitions simple. Be consistent with slide design so the audience can understand those visuals really quickly.
Awesome. This has been super helpful. Now, before we move to Q&A, I know we have a lot of folks watching who want more help, who have lots and lots of questions, and I want to let you know that we have lots more to offer at Duarte. Starting with our blog, which is free and it's packed with articles written by folks like Charity, including one based on this webinar, so check it out. The Duarte Academy has lots more for you to learn. We're offering right now free access to our Presentation Principles e-course to anyone who's laid off, furloughed, or has lost hours due to the pandemic. It's self-paced, you take it on your own schedule, you learn how to write, design, and deliver your next talk. And it gives you an opportunity to gain some confidence and build up your communication skills. We'll put some more information about that offer in the chat. We have 3 additional self-paced e-courses. They range from 90 minutes to 4 hours. They cover story, design, and delivery. 3 packages of speaker coaching available to you, which means one-on-one coaching with someone over a virtual platform for you or for your whole team to get better at delivering your presentation. And our in-person Duarte workshops, the live facilitator, are now all virtual. The Visual Story, Data Story, Resonate, and Captivate, and our newest Captivate for virtual communication. So how to give better presentations when you're like this, virtual. And of course, we'll be back here next week with another webinar, and I'll say more about that just before we close. But I want to give us some time to answer some of these questions. We've got a lot of them in the different platforms we're broadcasting to. Someone asked, specific font size used for mobile. Is there a rule of thumb for the font size? So can you give us a number, Charity?
So I saw that question come through too, and I quickly opened that file that made that slide. That specific slide, the headers were 28. I ran some tests on my own phone and a couple other ones that were here, and I felt like going below around 22 was starting to get into that iffy territory for phones.
Got it. And the font, the actual font that you're using matters too, because some fonts show up better than others.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's why testing is really, really valuable.
Testing is the most important thing. Any recommendations from you, Charity, about the package we should be using? PowerPoint, Google Slides, InDesign, Keynote from Apple. I'm sure there are others out there. What are your recommendations?
The package that for making slides?
Sounds like, yeah.
I think each one has its own individual strengths. I've used all three that you mentioned, not InDesign for presentations though, and some are better than others for other things. I don't have a favorite child.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a question people have been asking of Duarte for 30 years, you know, and we're as an agency, we're platform agnostic. It's whatever our clients need us to use. And I've heard different designers over the years talk about, oh, this one does animations better if you want to do really complex, cool motion paths.
Yeah.
And this one handles media files better. and this one gives you more control in this area. But there isn't there isn't one silver bullet platform.
There isn't. I can tell you what my favorite thing is about those big three. If I'm comparing them to each other, I like PowerPoint because it has a lot more options, as you mentioned, for animations and basically for everything. I like Keynote because it really kind of guides you through the process of designing a slide. And I love Google Slides for collaborating. Like, nothing beats it.
That's great. Those are 3 great tips. Someone asked about reducing noise and simplicity. Isn't this the same rule whether the presentation is virtual or live? Maybe it's more critical if it's virtual, but isn't it always the case? Don't you always want to be simple?
It is. And those really are 2 sides of the same coin. And I'm so happy that somebody actually caught that. Yes, we are always trying to reduce noise, which is one of the reasons that I picked it for here as a topic. But what I spoke about with animations is a problem that is amplified in the virtual world. So I feel like it's really important for that. And then the simplicity really resonates with the font size and keeping it. We really need to simplify our slides when sharing virtually, especially if it's high stakes. You don't want like bad resolution to ruin that visual message.
Right. Yeah. Bandwidth is really just the equalizing factor for everybody right now. So you have to clamp down on some of your choices even more.
Yeah.
Someone asked, what platform did you use for this presentation? So start with, what platform did you build these slides in?
These were all built in PowerPoint.
Yeah, this is PowerPoint. And then we use a tool called StreamYard to broadcast. So we're sharing video and we're sharing PowerPoint through this tool called StreamYard to send it out to Facebook Live and YouTube and LinkedIn.
To all the places.
To all the places. Yep. Yep. Well, we've reached the end of another episode of Come Together, our weekly web series. Thank you first to Emily, Kat, Alexa, and Julie for their hard work behind the scenes. If you've had a question answered in the chat, it's probably by one of them, and they're making us look great today. And thank you, Charity, for being our guest today. We really appreciate it. You were great. This was so fun.
Yeah,
also,
it was.
Thank you, our friends at home, for tuning in all over the world. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you come back next week when we'll have a special return guest. Cody Dishman appeared in our 2nd episode. He was wearing a shower cap and brushing his teeth, and he'll be back next week to talk to us about virtual platforms, getting the most from your virtual platform. Until then, be well and stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you right here next week.
Thanks, everyone.